Hello and welcome to the Point. My guest today is Shyam Saran, a formidable diplomat and former Foreign Secretary of India. He was the chief architect of the India-US civilian nuclear deal. After retirement from the Foreign Office, he was appointed advisor to the Prime Minister on nuclear issues. Currently, Ambassador Shyam Saran is chairman of a think tank, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, based in New Delhi. He is also the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board, NSAB. Ambassador Shyam Saran, welcome to this interaction.
Thank you.
Let me begin by asking you about something with which you've been engaged as chairman of the NSAB, the National Security Doctrine. Why doesn't India have a national security doctrine? Various people have tried to formulate it, but it's not there.
Well, I would say that the impression that India does not have any kind of strategy is perhaps not correct. India does have a strategy according to which it follows its foreign and security policies. But yes, you are right that it has never been articulated in any kind of systematic manner. And what we are trying to do is to see whether we can get not a national security doctrine, but a kind of a national security strategy in place.
But it would be a written document. May not be publicly accessible. But
well, we certainly hope that we can put it in the public domain so that people can discuss it, people can debate it. That's really up to the government.
But let me ask you this. Why do we need a national security doctrine? What's the objective need for such a doctrine?
If you look at the kind of security challenges which India faces today, most of these security challenges are what I call very cross-cutting in nature. So, if you are dealing with economic issues, it is impacted by security issues. If you are dealing with security issues, they are impacted by economic issues, or they are impacted by even ecological issues. So, there is a very wide spectrum that you have to cover when you are trying to get a strategy in place, a whole of government approach. You know, we are very used to working in silos. How do you get a kind of a whole of government approach which goes across sectors? That is the important.
No, the US has a national security doctrine. It's a superpower, it's a big power. It's willing to tell the world what its national security interests are and willing to shape the world according to its security needs. So is India willing to tell the world, look, these are our national interests and this is how we're going to shape the world, or at least our neighborhood or the countries that we can influence according to our security interests?
Well, there are areas where we can certainly influence the external environment around us. There are certain ways in which we have to adjust to the pressures which come from outside, or the challenges which we face from outside. As I mentioned to you, today it's very difficult to make a distinction between purely domestic issues and purely external issues. You know, they actually interact with one another. So what are you trying to do with a national security strategy? What you are trying to do is to identify what are the key challenges which the country is facing and is likely to confront in the coming years, and what are the best ways in which to actually address those challenges.
So we are not pretending to be a strong world power.
No, you don't need, you know, it's not as if only superpowers can have national security strategies.
Not a doctrine.
Well, as I said, I do not really believe that we are really in need of a doctrine so much as a strategy. There is a difference between the two. I think it is better to start with a strategy, and later on, if it is necessary, we can think in terms.
So then, once you write it as a doctrine, it's written in stone, is it? Or
no,
somewhat.
Even the superpowers keep revising their doctrines. Nothing is written in stone.
Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about a slightly different subject. For historical, geographical, and even reasons for our political system or our federal structure, we have been subject of terror attacks since the 1980s. Now, why have we not been able to deal with terrorism effectively?
There are many reasons why we have not been able to deal with the issue of terrorism. I would not say that it's an either-or kind of situation. We could have been more successful than we have been. You know, we don't get to know of terrorism threats that have actually been successfully dealt with. So we should not say that we have not been able to deal with the issue of terrorism at all. There are ways in which we have to improve what we are doing. One is, you know, how do you ensure that your own internal security system is robust? your law and order machinery is robust. People are law abiding, because you cannot say they should be law abiding only as far as certain sectors are concerned and not in others. So there has to be a kind of culture of observing law.
Okay, fair enough.
This is something which is missing in the Indian. Second is capacities. Capacities in terms of your policemen, capacities in terms of your intelligence capabilities. We are very good at setting up apex institutions, but we pay very little attention to the foot soldiers who need to be properly trained, who need to really be looked after. That is what is missing.
Why is it that, we can do all these things internally, but when it comes to convincing the world to cooperate with us on terrorism, to support us because we've been victims of terrorism, we have not been very successful. For example, the US did not share information with us on David Headley. Even when he had been arrested, India was given access. The access was not one-to-one. US agents were always present, and there's no question of his extradition.
Let me make a general point. Nobody can pull the chestnuts out of the fire for you. Ultimately, we have to take care of our own security. Whatever we are able to obtain through cooperation with other friendly countries is, I think, a bonus. But ultimately, it is we who have to ensure that we are able to take care of our security. Now, I think if you look at the record, in recent years, our cooperation, say with the United States of America, but not only with the United States, but with other countries also, in terms of counter-terrorism, has actually improved quite considerably. Today, we have far more information sharing that takes place with the intelligence agencies of the friendly countries than ever before.
Well, it was taking place even when David Headley was operating in India. We had a counter-terrorism mechanism in place with the US.
True, but at the same time, it is something which is a process. You gain a certain degree of trust by working with one another. Intelligence agencies are notoriously mistrustful even of their allied agencies. So I think the fact that we have been slowly building up a level of trust where even sensitive information can be exchanged, that is a plus point, and we should, of course, strengthen this. But as I said, I repeat, ultimately it is we who have to take care of our own security.
All right. Several governments have said that India will have zero tolerance for terror. What does zero tolerance for terror really mean in operational terms? We tell Pakistan zero tolerance for terror, and even when you were Foreign Secretary, you were talking to Pakistan. How did you justify talking to Pakistan when Pakistan was engaged with terrorism against India?
Well, number one, I do not think that talking or not talking is leverage. It's actually, to me, it is a sign of weakness when the only thing that you can do is to say, I will not talk to you anymore. And especially when after some time you start talking to them again. So that's not leverage. I mean, that's not the way in which you can ensure that there is zero tolerance.
But what sense does it make to say India has zero tolerance for terror? How do we demonstrate that?
The only way you can demonstrate it is, as I said, number one, do you have the internal capability to be able to forestall, or if an attack takes place, how you are able to respond to it? Unless you can change the strategic calculus on the other side of the border, unless Pakistan believes that there is a cost to be paid for carrying out terrorist activities in India, why should you stop? Because if it is a low cost, low risk way of keeping India off balance, why should you not pursue it?
We'll pursue that further, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll continue with this interesting discussion in a bit. Don't go. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Ambassador Shyam Saran on India's national security. So how do we make Pakistan realize that there's a cost to pay for terrorism?
It will have to be a number of measures on your part, both in terms of positive measures as well as in terms of negative measures. So positive measures would be, what benefits would Pakistan lose through pursuing this policy? Negative would be, what kind of penalty would have to be paid or cost will have to be paid as a result of following these policies. And those can relate to, for example, vulnerabilities which Pakistan itself has. Whether it is in Gilgit-Baltistan or whether it is in Balochistan or whether it is in terms of Afghanistan itself.
But when we say exploiting Pakistan's vulnerability, surely we are not recommending that India also engage in terrorism in Pakistan.
That is Pakistani specialty. I don't think that India can, even if it wishes to go in that direction. But short of actually having any kind of a terrorist act on the Pakistani side, there are many other ways in which you can exercise pressure.
But vulnerabilities could also be exploited positively. For example, if Pakistan's economy needs to really lift off, it needs to take advantage of Indian growth.
Said that there are many positive things that you can do. If there are benefits that come to Pakistan as a result of following more positive policies vis-a-vis India, then any kind of terrorist act will obviously, impact on that. For example, we have built up many cross-border linkages with Pakistan, limited as they are, but they still are something which big benefit to Pakistan and big benefit to India. Naturally, if these are interrupted, there is a cost which is imposed on Pakistan. So there are various ways in which you can build up a series of interdependencies which give you the possibility of restraining Pakistan from taking negative actions against you.
Okay, let's talk about China. Why has India not been able to organize itself politically and economically in its northeastern states to tackle the threat from China? Earlier the question was of arms ingress, now goods and other things are being imported from China.
I do not think we should make the mistake of thinking of China only as a military threat, because China's challenge to India is across many sectors, whether it is economic, security, political. So with regard to the security part that you are talking about, obviously there is an asymmetry between the two sides and we have to address that asymmetry. But that will need resources.
But we've created a new strike corps and we've also put together some other strike formations, and people say that they don't meet our immediate needs and they're not even of international standard.
They, as I said, the first order of business is this asymmetry that I mentioned between China and India. Do you accept that as permanent, or do you have the ambition to be able to not only equal but to surpass China? If the latter is the case, then whatever threat perception you have, whatever challenge China poses, you need asymmetric responses in the meantime. How do I make certain? It's not necessary that you should have soldier for soldier, road for road on each side, but you need to be able to work out a strategy to deal with this asymmetry so that there is a cost to be paid. There is a risk to be taken by the other side if it indulges in any hostile action.
All right. So one of the ways of sort of bridging the gap with China would actually be to set up a domestic defense manufacturing industry. Why haven't we done that properly?
It's not only a domestic manufacturing industry, but you also need, your entire economy has to grow, because defense production cannot be de-linked from, the other segments of the economy. But where we have gone wrong is that it is inevitable, like China too, to import arms to begin with, but then you start using the technology that you have received to build up your own strength. We have unfortunately not been able to do that. And I think unless we organize our defense production in a manner that emphasizes not only licensed production, but it also emphasizes technology, it emphasizes design, we would not really be able to build up a...
So meanwhile, we'll be dependent on the goodwill of our friends who supply defense equipment to us, and our capacity to fight would be dependent on that.
Well, to a very large extent, that is true.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the security threat posed by immigration from the neighborhood to India. Now, Nepalese come here under a treaty, Indo-Nepal Treaty of 1950, which doesn't regulate anything. It just allows people to come here and get
on a reciprocal basis.
On a reciprocal basis, but more Nepalese come to India than Indians going to Nepal. That you know very well. You've been ambassador to Nepal. But no such regulation is there for Bangladesh, for example. And this Bangladesh issue is a critical issue in states like Assam and even Nagaland and West Bengal, the entire northeast. Now, do you think immigration from India's neighborhood should be regulated, or should we actually move towards, making South Asia a sort of free movement zone where people can come and work in whichever country they like?
I do not think that what you mention as a open regime is necessarily antithetical to having regulated flows. You don't only have the unregulated flow of people but you also have a very big problem of unregulated flow of contraband goods. So you need to have regulation, you need to have better border infrastructure, and you need to have good controls in place which allows the flow of goods and people, but in a controlled manner.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Do you share the view that India is being encircled by China through Pakistan, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives? And if so, what are we doing to counter this strategy?
I think we should get out of this siege mentality, as if we are being hemmed in from all sides. This is a psychological reaction rather than a substantive reaction. I think
but these things are happening on the ground. Substantive things are happening on the ground.
What is happening on the ground?
Chinese
I have not
presence
seen
in Myanmar, Chinese presence in Bangladesh.
a Chinese base being set up in any of our neighboring countries. I do not see, except for Pakistan, the deployment of some Chinese military elements. If China has increased its economic involvement with our neighbors in relation to its own economy, well, your response to that should be that you should increase your presence. If you leave open spaces, I'm not surprised that somebody is coming and taking those spaces. So this is more a reflection of what you have not been able to do rather than a reflection of the success that the Chinese have.
But you speak as if you are recommending to government what should be done. You've been in recommending positions yourself. Why didn't you do it when you were there?
Well, if I had the authority to manage everything myself, that would be great. But I don't have that authority. I've never had.
So tell me something about the defense cooperation with the US, and could we be threatened potentially in future with sanctions like Russia, has been sanctioned by the US?
Well, I can't say what may happen in the future. What I can say is that in terms of the strategic cooperation that we have with the United States of America, we have, in fact, number one, made certain that we are not entirely dependent upon the United States. We have several sources of supply of arms, not only the United States. So even if the United States...
Okay, so we have insurance against it.
Yes, we have insurance against that. And secondly, we now have also a proposal to cooperate together both in defense production as well as research.
Now, you were the chief architect of the Indo-US civilian nuclear cooperation deal, and at that point you had said, this will serve energy needs in India. Now, not a single megawatt or kilowatt of energy has been produced because of the civilian nuclear deal. So, did we let down America, or did the Americans let us down?
No, I don't think either side has let the other down. The purpose of negotiating the nuclear deal was not merely energy, but it also had a larger strategic dimension.
Those aims have been met?
Well, the fact that you are not constrained by the kind of non-proliferation regime which operated against us, is that not a big advantage? The fact that you today are able to get nuclear fuel from a variety of sources for your existing nuclear plants, isn't that a plus point? And I would not write off the possibility of actually expanding our nuclear energy sector with cooperation with the United States, with France, with Russia. Don't forget that we have also been impacted by the disaster that has taken place in Fukushima. This has turned the sentiment in the country, in many parts of the country, against nuclear energy. We have to educate public opinion. We have to make certain that, the kind of apprehension and risk people feel, we are able to allay those risks.
Okay, my last question to you is about internal security. What should be the strategy of dealing with the Maoists? And to what extent does the government's internal security strategy get impacted by center-state relations?
Center-state relations play a very important role in this respect. But the short answer to the question you have raised is, we must not treat the left-wing extremism phenomena only as a law and order problem, only as a security problem. We should understand that there are very real economic and social factors behind the rise of left-wing extremism, and unless we address those, merely treating as a law and order or a police problem is not going to solve the problem.
Okay, we've run out of time. Ambassador Shyam Saran, it was a pleasure talking to you. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting personality. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching.